But yeah, I'm going to talk about Ruined by Design, which was the last book I read before lockdown, when this was scheduled before. So I was delighted to see it back. Danae, can you skip on? So as the subtitle to the book says, you know, this is a book about like how designers ruin the world and what we can do to fix it. And it's very much about, you know, the scams and industrial complex that we're in, that Vonnie was talking about in her first talk there. So this is a book by Mike Montero. He runs a design studio in California called Mule. So far what you've got is it's a book by a designer for designers about design. So this question was going to work better in person, but like, who here, you know, considers themselves a designer? See a few hands going up. So probably quite a lot that haven't. So, but this book really is like, who is here as a product manager or a product owner, or has any, if you have any influence whatsoever really in the final shape or form or content of the product, you know, or the way that a service works, then you should consider yourself a designer, and this book is for you. And it's very much about trying to leave the world that we created in a better place than we found it. And, you know, I think that's kind of sorely needed right now. So I'll get into it. First slide. So, excuse the language in this. I'm just passing on Mike. He's quite an angry character. And there's quite a lot of profanity in it. I'll kind of keep it clean. So my personal story is I joined the web in 1992, like a lifetime ago. And I've loved it ever since I got my first email address in the States. I love the transformational opportunities it presents. I love the way that anybody, anywhere who wants to comment, to create, or connect with anybody else can. I am just about remain an optimist, if not a utopian. And I'm trying to kind of keep the faith in this amazing invention that we're all lucky enough to live through. But frankly, you know, as Lonnie was saying, you know, we're fucking it up. Like, it's turning into, like, you know, scams and an industrial complex. So you look at platforms like Twitter, you know, a platform that I still love for all of those above reasons, you know, has become a mouthpiece for a crazy racist president. You've got Facebook, who are literally messing with people's heads. You may not be aware, and not accidentally either. You know, in 2014, they conducted a psychological experiment which manipulated of 689,003 users with increased positive or negative posts to see if this affected the mood of their future status updates. And they did this without any ethical oversight or anyone's consent. So Facebook's motto of moving fast and breaking things is a terrible motto when you have 2.6 billion users, and when breaking things means intentionally making people feel like shit to see if you can sell them more further down the line. So this book, frankly, is a litany of like how the internet has been broken, how Airbnb is leading to the gutting of affordable housing for residents, how Instagram is linked in study after study to increased mental health issues and to increasing suicide rates among teens, and how it's complicit in things like the way that we hound celebrities, such as Caroline Flack earlier this year, literally to death. And let's bring this right up to date. If you go to the next slide, and apologies, a bit of a content trigger warning here. This was shared with me earlier this week. If you can't make it out, I don't even want to go into it. It's foul, to be honest. You know, the text on the right is basically saying that this doesn't contravene Facebook's community standards. So like, how is this acceptable? Hundreds, if not thousands, of designers and developers and moderators are involved in designing, launching, and maintaining the platform that allows for content like this, you know, on Facebook. And as an aside, if you ever go into Twitter and change your language settings or your content settings to Germany, all the Nazis disappear, because Germany has very, very strict laws against hate speech and Nazi propaganda. So and the software will immediately remove all of that content. You know, it doesn't go through moderation, it just gets removed. So it can be done. It's not a software problem. Twitter and Facebook are working exactly as they were designed. So how is this the case? So we go to the next slide. Money is to blame. I know this sounds naive, but look at something like Trump tweeting about nuking North Korea. You know, does it get him banned? Absolutely not. It goes into a highlights email because it drives engagement. So many platforms start with noble aims, apart from Facebook, which was always kind of a little bit pervy, to be honest. But you take Uber. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us kind of fans and, you know, and love the service model of Uber. You know, it's a great multimodal model. It's genius, actually, like, you know, from a business canvas kind of point of view, you know, connecting drivers and passengers, everybody benefits, until there's a significant investment event. When that happens, you need to scale. you need to scale to satisfy investors. So all of a sudden you need to hire 5,000 drivers. So background checks get skipped. You need to hire 3,000 developers, and not all of those are top notch, and not all of those are educated in designing ethically. Surge pricing comes into effect because you need to make more from every passenger to satisfy those investors. And surge pricing comes into effect even in the aftermath of things like terrorist attacks, as we've seen. You need to expand into 500 cities. So then negotiations with the ecosystems that you're going into and the licensing and the regulators, that has to get kind of shortened and shortcut in a lot of cases. In fact, those negotiations then get dirty because you need to expand so fast. Uber actually created a tool called Greyball, which tracked the numbers and the locations of accounts linked to licensees and council members and so on. So they could see where they were moving at any one time and actually deny them access to any Uber cars, which was illegal and obviously kind of unethical. So it's not just Uber. As we said, Airbnb's gone from a community, a great community. I was a very early adopter of Airbnb, where you would go and stay in other people's homes, connecting holidaymakers and homeowners. It's gone to something that's gutting neighborhoods. And on occasion, lots of report occasions, allowing people to deny guests on the basis of their race or their sexuality. So specifically money, particularly VC money, has shifted the delicate balance of these ecosystems. So the need to scale and to demonstrate revenue, shifted the benefactors from the community to the investor. And then that becomes the primary driver for design decisions. So next slide, please. We need to remember who we as designers kind of work for. So there's a long-held, almost kind of like sacrosanct belief in tech that, the way to success is to build a tool that you want to use, like to eat your own dog food, because if you're the customer, then you don't need to guess what anybody else needs. You build something that's going to satisfy you, and then you find other people who are going to want it and use it. And that's the way to success. But the problem with that is that most tech has been built by rooms full of white guys. So product teams in Silicon Valley, just as one example, are dominated by white males. Only 25% of computing jobs are held by women. Only 1% are held by Latinx women. So the biases are built into these platforms from the core, and then they scale. So again, I'm going to wail on Twitter here, but Twitter never built in a way to deal with harassment because none of the people building it had ever been harassed. So they'd never received death threats. They'd never been stalked. No execs at Facebook were worried about being outed by a real names policy, like dozens of gay teens and trans people were. So I know, we're actually in a really dynamic, really successful sector here in Scotland, but we need to be ready for any tool that we build to have a global impact. Even if it doesn't go global, it's going to reach people that are unlike us when we design it, So people with different needs, different abilities, different cultures, different languages. So, and we should want, and I know so many good designers that do think this way, we want our product to work well for them, not just altruistically, but so that we can take their money and make them customers. So as designers, there's a lot in this book about, the need for us to protect the need of our customers and to stand up to our bosses and to stand up to investors as well in terms of championing those needs. So to do that, we need to better understand them. So what's the answer to better understanding? Is it greater empathy? Well, Mike quite gracefully says, fuck no. Empathy is great. And I've seen this myself and I felt this myself. Empathy is great, but too often it's projecting our own experiences and assumptions onto a cohort or persona. Like however much research you do, you still filter it through your own lens of experience. So if we go to the next slide, please. So I'm fully aware that this will be the slide that gets screenshotted with my face over it, and I'm completely prepared for that and comfortable with it. So the answer is not more empathy. The answer is more diverse hiring in our industry. So why teach someone to think outside the box when you can hire outside it? Don't ask a team of male designers to go into the field to see what women think. Hire women to design your products. So this book hammered home that we at Create Future, we need to be more diverse. And Black Book Thinking and Rebel Ideas and a bunch of other books as well that I've read recently, So we need to be more diverse, by gender, socioeconomically, by racially to deliver better outcomes. We're only a small team, there's 12 of us, so we can't hire for a project. Where we can't hire for a project, we can certainly bring people into the design process, as well participants and users much closer into the design process. Because as much as an ally that I would like to think myself, and however much I educate myself, like this industry I hadn't realized quite much until reading this book, how much this industry, the society is designed around me as a white, able male. So I am a beneficiary of it. And so you need to, and I know it sounds trite, but, being educated to like constantly check your privileges is something that we need to make sure we do as designers. So I'm skipping loads of the book, there's a load more that kind of goes into, but his last point I thought was quite interesting and controversial was that design should be licensed. So this sounds kind of, as I said, this sounded completely counterintuitive to me when I first saw it and impractical. But the argument is that we as designers wield power over tools that are affecting increasingly large parts of society and increasingly more lives. And that with that power comes responsibility, and we should commit to act responsibly in the same way that we commit to drive well by agreeing to be licensed. And if this sounds ridiculous, he brings the analogy of meatpacking in the early 20th century in the US, which was documented in a book called The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. So the meatpacking industry, and there's a pretty heavy metaphor here, the meatpacking industry in the US was so foul, so unethical, so vile that they were willing to package and sell diseased meat to the public without them knowing it. And the book was a bestseller. The public got skittish about eating meat. The industry was investigated, and the Meat Inspection Act of 1906 was put in place to protect the public. So I kicked off by listing some of the rotten meat being packaged by the big tech companies. Vonnie's covered a couple of them as well in her talk, so I'll not go back there. I mean, I didn't even get into electoral manipulation or Volkswagen faking engine emissions. And if you think this is a US problem, and it can't happen here, you should look into, I was reading recently about the shitty IT rollout of a Horizon system by the post office, which was so badly designed and resulted in honest people being accused and prosecuted of fraud to the extent where one postmaster took his own life. So when people start dying, we regulate industries and we license practitioners. So we need to improve the practices and the standards ourselves, all through the industry bodies that we're part of, or improvements will be imposed and standards will be imposed upon us. So finally, this isn't a business book, with 5 easy things to kind of put in. It's an angry diatribe and a bit of a kind of call to arms. There are no easy answers in the book. There is, though, a really interesting introduction with an ethics of design manifesto, a kind of Hippocratic oath that has been drafted in concert with a lot of designers, which is well worth reading. So the tech industry as we design it isn't working. It's shifted too far from the societal good, and we as designers should be comfortable and confident to stand up for ourselves and our users. To design better, we need to understand better and be more diverse. And if we're serious about our craft, then we should be happy to be accountable for it. So Victorian asylums had a simple test to see if a patient was fit to leave an institution. So they'd leave the patient in a room with a sink overflowing and blocked, and a mop and a bucket. And then they'd leave the room and lock the door. And if the patient picked up the mop and the bucket and started frantically mopping the floor, then they weren't allowed to leave. But if they reached in and unblocked the sink and turned off the taps, then they were free to go. So, the mess that we're in kind of may sometimes feel overwhelming, but this book kind of convinced me that it's never too late to stop mopping the floor and try and turn off the taps. That's me. Thank you.